Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees. Here's tonight's top story. Killers of emergency workers will face mandatory life sentences. It marks the end of a tireless campaign from Lissie Harper, whose police officer husband was killed by teenagers in 2019. Also tonight, a survey says care home residents are being neglected and dying alone because of staff shortages, with numbers expected to dwindle further by the end of the year. And NASA launches a spacecraft to bump into an asteroid's moon. Scientists hope they can learn how to change a moon's orbit and prevent any future doomsday collisions with Earth. A change in the law expected to come into force next year follows a 2-year campaign by the widow of a police officer. The change will mean life in jail for offenders who kill on-duty emergency workers. Lissie Harper says it's been a long and hard journey, but she knows that her husband, who was killed while on a late-night burglary call, would be proud to see the law come to this stage. NTD's Jane Well has more.
For Lissie Harper, it marks the end of a tireless campaign, meeting with Justice Secretary Dominic Raab, who backed her calls to give mandatory life sentences to anyone found guilty of killing emergency workers. In 2019, Lissie's newlywed husband, PC Andrew Harper, was dragged to his death while responding to a 999 call, his foot caught on the tow rope of a car. 3 teenagers were jailed for manslaughter and given sentences between 13 and 16 years. Lissie was outraged they were cleared of murder, saying emergency workers deserve better protection. Ministers approved tougher sentences, what's now known as Harper's Law. Raab says it reflects the severity of the offence.
There'll be a mandatory life sentence, minimum tariff set by the judge. That's what you would typically get for murder. And I think, OK, so it's a higher sentence. I think it's right. I think it reflects the severity of the offence. I do think there is something specifically egregious about attacking and killing an emergency worker in the course of their duty. And I want the victims' families, people like Lissie, but also across the country, as well as the emergency workers themselves, to know that we're standing up for them.
He said there were 10,000 convictions for assaults on emergency workers last year. The new law could be introduced next year, a relief for Lissie, who says Harper's Law would give emergency workers the extra protection they need. Jane Werrell, NTD News.
Labour MP Mary Rimmer suggested an amendment to the Health and Care Bill yesterday, proposing a change in the law to help curb forced organ harvesting in China, where organs are carved out from political prisoners and sold for profit. In 2019, the China Tribunal ruled that imprisoned practitioners of the spiritual discipline Falun Gong are the main source of organs for forced organ harvesting.
The world might believe that China has an ethical organ donation system based on the World Health Organization assessment. Yet that assessment from WHO is based on a country's self-assessment, in this case by the Chinese Communist Party. It is a barbaric practice that every democracy in the world should be looking at what they can do to stop. I am grateful to members from right across this House. Members of every party have supported this. And I am grateful to them for supporting the new clauses. This new clause will not stop the trade, but it will show Britain is doing our part to help and to influence other countries to do the same.
The Speaker selected the amendment, but it wasn't put to vote. The law would ban British citizens from receiving an organ abroad without consent of the donor. A similar change to the law is expected to be put forward when the bill goes for the House of Lords. A survey by public service union Unison says some care home residents are dying alone and their everyday needs are being neglected due to dangerously low staffing levels. Almost every single care worker surveyed spoke of staff shortages, with burnout and low pay being among the main reasons given, and about a third said that staff levels were dangerously low. This report comes from NTD's Malcolm Hudson.
People in residential care are being denied a dignified end to their lives as there are not enough staff to sit with them during their final hours, according to a survey by Unison. 31% of care workers said that staffing levels are dangerously low, getting worse and negatively affecting care quality, while 97% said that their employers are currently experiencing staff shortages. Unison surveyed over 1,600 employees in England, Wales and Northern Ireland who work in care homes or help people at home or in supported living. Respondents commented that people weren't getting regular baths or showers, that meals are late, that some residents are being put to bed early so that staff could deal with everyone, and that residents are not getting enough one-to-one time. One carer said she recently had to choose between holding the hand of a dying resident and going to clean another. The pressure is too much for some. Of the staff considering leaving the care sector, the top reasons given were stress and mental health and better pay elsewhere. The next biggest reason is compulsory vaccination for care home workers, which is due to come into full effect on Christmas Day. Unison said they fear this could lead to an exodus of staff, impacting an already vulnerable sector. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
The UK government warns Russia that it would be a grave mistake if it attacked Ukraine. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine have intensified further, with both sides today staging military drills. Ukraine's military intelligence has said it believes Russia may be preparing for an invasion. NTD's Eddie Aiken has the story.
Foreign Secretary Liz Truss warned Russia that it would be making a grave mistake if it attacked Ukraine as the situation there intensifies. Truss said on Wednesday London is working closely with its NATO allies to support Ukraine.
We are very close allies of Ukraine, and we are working with our partners in NATO, but also directly with Ukraine to make sure that they are fully supported.
And if Russia were to attack, what would the UK?
Well, I think that would be a grave mistake from Russia.
It comes as Russia staged military drills in the Black Sea, south of Ukraine, on Wednesday. Ukraine staged exercises of its own the same day near the border with Belarus. It has deployed 8,500 extra troops to its border with Belarus, saying it fears being drawn into the migrant crisis. Kiev also worries that the border with Belarus, a close Russian ally, could be used by Russia to stage a military assault. The head of Ukraine's military intelligence told the Military Times that Russia had more than 92,000 troops massed around Ukraine's borders and was preparing for an attack by the end of January or the beginning of February. Moscow has dismissed such suggestions as inflammatory, said it was not threatening anyone, and defended its rights to deploy its troops as it wished. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
A spacecraft designed to crash was launched last night on a NASA mission to demonstrate the world's first planetary defense system. Scientists sent out the craft to crash into an asteroid's moon, deflecting the moon from its orbit. This technology may one day be needed to stop a doomsday collision with Earth. We've got more from NTD's Lily Joel.
NASA has launched humanity's first asteroid deflection test mission. It's called the DART, or Double Asteroid Redirection Test, and it's hoped it might one day save Earth from incoming space rocks.
And this is the first time in history we can do something about it. We can learn how to both find those bodies and also hopefully to deflect them and kind of take them away from the danger zone of Earth.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Mission.
The DART blasted off from a California Space Force base Tuesday night local time. Its mission is to crash into an asteroid's moon, change its orbit period, and affect the timing of the moon moving around the asteroid.
We will see that by just changing that orbit, by measuring that orbit change, we will be able to derive really the most important quantity, which is how much of our momentum got imparted onto that small body, which of course in a danger situation is the most important question. You know, how much does it take to bump a rock out of the way given its size and speed?
NASA shared some good news earlier this year when it gave Earth the all-clear from menacing asteroids for the next century. But scientists believe only a third of such threats can be observed. When the DART spacecraft arrives in autumn next year, it will use autonomous navigation software to deliberately crash into the asteroid's moonlet at a speed of about 4 miles per second. Scientists hope the impact will change the speed of the moonlet's orbit around its main body by just a fraction of a percent, enough to alter its orbital period by several minutes. Lily Zhou, NTD News.
New NHS guidance asks doctors not to use antidepressants as their first choice for mild depression. It suggests they prioritise offering treatments such as meditation or behavioural therapy in consultation with the patient. The use of antidepressants has been steadily increasing in recent years, especially during the pandemic. Here's NTD's Joy Duguid with more details.
According to new NHS guidance, people suffering mild depression should be offered a choice of counselling sessions or group classes in things such as meditation, exercise, or behavioural therapy instead of antidepressants. The draft guidance from the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence says doctors shouldn't routinely offer antidepressant medication as first-line treatment for less severe depression, unless that is the person's preference. It calls on doctors to involve patients in conversations about what would suit them best, but says they should prioritise psychological treatments and behavioural therapy. Experts said the new draft guideline, which is subject to consultation, is the first in 12 years to identify, treat and manage depression in adults. The guideline also says medics should explain to a patient that if they want to stop taking antidepressants, the withdrawal may take weeks or months. The use of antidepressants in the UK has been steadily increasing since 2015. Figures from the NHS show that more than 20 million antidepressants were prescribed between October and December 2020, a 6% increase compared with the same 3 months in 2019. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
Next, 13 cultural artefacts stolen a century and a half ago following a battle between the British and Ethiopian empires have returned to Ethiopia following months of negotiations.
After a century and a half away, 13 stolen Ethiopian artifacts have returned home. The items, according to officials, are part of the largest act of restitution in Ethiopia's history, repatriated following months of negotiations. They were put on show in Addis Ababa at the weekend, at a press conference with Tourism Minister Nesise Chala.
Our country's ancient civilization, history, artifacts, fingerprints of indigenous knowledge, culture and value have been looted through war and smuggled out illegally. At this moment, countless treasures of ours are found in various countries' museums, research institutes, and in the hands of individuals.
These particular items, including an ornate processional cross and a richly coloured triptych depicting the crucifixion of Jesus, were taken in 1868, after the Battle of Magdala between the British and Ethiopian empires. Teferi Mellers, Ethiopia's UK ambassador, said many of the treasures were located in Britain.
It was not possible to return all of them. However, these treasures are the biggest so far in number and in kind. This is the first time this quantity of treasure is returned home.
But the work is far from over. Teferi said Ethiopia is negotiating with the British Museum for the return of 12 tablets. They are replicas of the Ark of the Covenant and are sacred in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. British museums have long resisted campaigns for the return of artworks, often citing legislation that bans them from disposing of their collections. But pressure has increased, and last year the British Museum said it would loan some works to Nigeria for a new museum due to open in 2023. The restitution also comes as a conflict between Ethiopia's federal government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front continues to rage. Teferi warned that cultural artifacts are being destroyed and looted in the fighting, saying that without the treasures there is no history. And without history, no nation.
Still to come, unrest continues in the French territory of Guadeloupe. Protests over COVID restrictions imposed by Paris led to looting and violence on the Caribbean island. That and more after the break. More than 20 people have died after their boat sank in the English Channel, French media have reported. French politician Frank Derson confirmed the news. Derson said on Twitter the boat was carrying more than 50 people. At least 24 died, while others survived. A rescue operation is underway by air and sea as French and British authorities search for anyone still in the water. French officials said on Tuesday that the situation in the French territory of Guadeloupe remains very difficult. Unrest erupted last week on the Caribbean island over COVID-19 restrictions imposed by Paris. The French Prime Minister had this to say on Monday.
It is a small violent minority that robs stores, blocks roads, holds motorists to ransom, prevents sick people from accessing sometimes vital care, and even goes so far as to shoot at the forces.
Drone footage from Tuesday showed a barricade of nearly 24 burnt cars, some turned over in the city of Petit-Bourg. A general strike entered a second week and many stores remained shuttered after nighttime looting amid protests over the COVID restrictions. People on Guadeloupe have been especially incensed by a requirement for all healthcare workers to be vaccinated against COVID-19. The mandate has touched a nerve in a population that is descended from slaves who worked on French sugar plantations. France has deployed 200 extra police officers to Guadeloupe to quell the unrest. Members of the European Parliament warned that the political crisis in Bosnia could reignite civil war in the Balkan country. During a debate in Strasbourg on Tuesday, members called on the EU to impose sanctions to preserve Bosnia's territorial integrity. NTD's David English tells us more.
Members of the European Parliament on Tuesday voiced their concern over the political crisis in Bosnia.
25 years after the civil war, in which over 100,000 people lost their lives, Bosnia and Herzegovina is on the brink of collapse yet again. This could mark a return to the violence of the 90s, a scenario which we don't even want to consider.
The leader of the Serb-dominated Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik, announced plans in October to create an army and judiciary for the Serb enclave. These moves to secession are troubling NATO, the US and the EU. Members of Parliament called on the European Union to impose sanctions, if necessary, to preserve Bosnia's territorial integrity.
We are committed to support the country's leaders in taking steps to de-escalate, resume dialogue and address the substance of issues that are fueling tensions. All political parties should return to state institutions and make sure they function smoothly.
A peace deal in 1995 that ended the three-year-long war divided Bosnia into two regions, the Serb-run Republika Srpska and the Bosniak-Croat Federation. The regions have wide autonomy but remain linked by some joint institutions. David English, NTD News.
Going to Serbia. Living conditions at the site of construction of a Chinese-run tire factory in Serbia are causing concerns for human rights groups. Vietnamese workers who are building the factory are allegedly living in cold dormitories with no warm water and not enough food. Some human rights groups have warned that the workers could be victims of human trafficking or even slavery. This report comes from NTD's Joy Duguid.
This site in northern Serbia is where some 500 workers are allegedly living in harsh conditions. Vietnamese workers are helping to build the first Chinese car tyre factory in Europe. They say they're living in barracks without heat or sufficient amounts of food.
Because they have a big problem. No electric, no water and no salary.
About 100 of Nguyen Van Chi's fellow workers who live in the same barracks have gone on strike to protest their plight. Some of them have been fired because of this. It has caught the attention of human rights groups in Serbia, which have warned that the workers could be victims of human trafficking or even slavery.
We are witnessing the breach of human rights right now because the Vietnamese workers are living in terrible conditions. Their passports and their identification cards are being taken by the Chinese employers. They've been here since May of this year, and they received only one salary.
The factory owner, Shandong Linglong Tire Company, denied to Serbian media that the company is responsible for the workers. It said it did not employ them directly and blamed their situation on subcontractors and job agencies in Vietnam. The company also denied that the workers were living in poor conditions and promised to return their documents. Serbia is a key spot for China's expansion. Chinese banks have granted billions of pounds in loans to Serbia to finance Chinese companies to build their infrastructure. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi has vetoed the third Chinese takeover in the country since his government took office in February. That's according to a Hong Kong filing by the rebuffed group Zhejiang Jingsheng Mechanical. The government was concerned the takeover of Applied Materials screen printing equipment business in Italy could have had consequences in the semiconductor sector. Italy reserves a right to use anti-takeover legislation to ward off undesired bits in industries deemed of strategic importance. Rome has so far stopped foreign interests in Italy 5 times since the introduction of the powers in 2012. 4 of these episodes beat away Chinese bids. Next, solar power is gaining popularity in Spain as energy prices soar and the government offers subsidized incentives for renewable energy sources. Many Spaniards have taken the plunge to install solar panels to reduce their energy bills and protect themselves from future price increases. NTD's Ana Rodriguez has this report.
Rooftop solar companies in sun-drenched Spain say a growing number of people are seeking home systems to avoid soaring energy prices. Power bills have risen almost 12% on average in Spain since 2018. Under one widely used tariff, bills were 50% higher in the first 2 weeks of November compared to the same period last year. Esther Banales says after seeing energy prices start to increase, she decided to install solar panels on her home.
I had been thinking about it for a year, but I didn't make the decision to do it given the high prices of solar panels. But then we saw how electricity bills were going up, and people began talking about whether we will have supply problems. So I decided it was the right time.
Installations like Banales' include inverter, which changes the raw power into electricity she can use. All this equipment doesn't come cheap. She paid around £6,400.
We're seeing now with the glut and COVID-related stress on the supply or on the supply chain that prices are slightly creeping up. So it's a great time to buy now because it's most likely that next year your installation might cost a little bit more than it does today.
Demand is booming in several European countries, according to Otovo, the Norway-based company that arranged Banales' installation.
I mean, we're seeing demand and interest skyrocket. In the case of Spain, we're talking about maybe, where we had 1 customer interested last year, we have 3 today. So tripling of that interest and demand.
Spanish renewable energy trade group APPA says that if prices stay at current highs, home solar systems could save 40 to 60% on annual power bills. APPA says with government subsidies of more than £750 million, complemented by local tax breaks, the cost of a solar installation would be redeemed in 5 years. Ana Rodriguez, NTD News.
And now to France. A rare manuscript by Albert Einstein was auctioned at Christie's in Paris yesterday. Expected to sell for £2 million, the final bid on the manuscript was a staggering £10 million by an unidentified buyer. The 50 pages, half filled with Einstein's handwriting, are one of only 2 known documents in which the physicist approaches his famous theory of relativity. NTD France correspondent David Vivez has more.
It depicts the inception of the general theory of relativity, one of Einstein's most notable discoveries.
The 54-page document, called the Einstein's Besso manuscript, is one of two surviving working documents that record the birth of Einstein's theory.
It is a document that shows the birth of the general theory of relativity, which is probably the most important discovery of Albert Einstein's career, and one of the most important theories in the history of modern physics.
The general theory of relativity was developed by Einstein between 1907 and 1915. It states that gravity is a warping of space and that massive objects can warp space and time around it. Vincent Beloy, a books and manuscripts expert at Christie's, said the manuscript challenges Einstein's popular image as an absolute genius, because it shows that even one of the world's most intelligent scientists made mistakes.
Einstein makes errors in this manuscript, and I think it makes it even greater in a way, because we see the persistence, the thought that was in the process of being built, that is being corrected and redirected.
The theory of relativity forever changed how scientists understood the universe and shaped modern physics.
That's your news for today. Have a good evening.